Welcome into the Cafe Nightly Show. I am your host, the Goldsmith. It is the 15th, Monday, the 15th of January, 2024. And getting things kicked off right up top, the news of the day, the important things going on in Upland, the updates, nothing. Nothing new as far as updates in the game of Upland, with a couple caveats. Obviously, we did head into the end of last week. We were working on the end of the cycles for Protem and Totem, end of the opportunity to start cycles anyways. We had a Protem sale on Friday, and we are, as of right now, getting into a period of time where people are setting into a groove, setting into a rhythm. People know a better idea of when to feed their Protem into their Totem and a better idea of the amount to feed. And in some cases, we have people who are already reporting dead Totems. So we can get into that in a little bit because that's all we've got for the news. And then, of course, get back into a little bit of what we're looking at here, future side of Upland. Ultimately, it's going to be a great week. I foresee it's going to be a great week to get some interviews in. I've got an interview later in the week. We'll see. Upland, get me some news. Get us that Spark update, that Spark roadmap update. Would love to see it. I'd love to have that conversation around the future of Spark come out. Love to hear more about a couple other things. And of course, trying to line up that interview as well for the playground, UGC playground, to get some more discussion on that, what the future of that looks like. And again, for people who want to know more, be able to get those questions answered. But for tonight, let's get a disclaimer out of the way because there's not a lot. All views and opinions expressed by myself are mine and mine alone, should not be taken as game strategy advice, should not be taken as financial advice. They don't represent the game and the staff of the team at Upland. And that's about it. No guests or contributors on tonight, so we can leave it there. We can make it that easy and that simple. And I can do another button on the shirt. I guess it was a little warm here in the house. But getting started here, first and foremost, what we have learned over the course of the last week is there is a little bit of variability. There is a format, there is a rhyme, there is a reason, but there's a little bit of variability with the way that the correlation between input and cycles works, where every single totem behaves just a little bit differently. So there isn't across the board rules for every single totem. There is a way to get there. There is a way to get a good understanding, get 90% there, titrate for your own. People have put a lot of effort into starting to put this all together and know what they're doing. With that being said, any things that have been outside of the ordinary, anything that had happened when you didn't meet the cycle over the course of the first 6-7 days, obviously cruising into the 7th day here, it's just the first 6-7 days, you could have affected the long-term output of your totem. You could potentially be reducing the number of intervals for the month, or unfortunately, there are people who are already reporting that they're dead. Their totem will not take any more Protem. It will not output any more Protem. It is gone for the cycle. I'll say the good news on that. Good news on your totem being dead at this point. The good news on that totem hitting that cycle that says you not eligible this cycle is that you will be getting the opportunity in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th cycle. Hopefully, knowing a little bit of data when you get into those cycles, it's a lot easier for you to maintain at that point. Knowing that with that maintenance, with that care, you do have the expectations that the better you do, the better you're going to profit. So that is a good news that there's future cycles to come. If you're out of Protem by the time you get to the future cycles, then you've got a problem. That's why we had the Totem Protem sale, the Protem sale on Friday. Key here on the sale is, last time I checked, there's still supply available. Upland discussed wanting to put enough out there that it's going to sit in the market for a little while, that people are going to continue to be able to buy it, that theoretically the overall quantity is to meet the long-term need. So this idea that if you run out of Protem, you can buy Protem to restart, I get it. I understand the point of it. It does feel a little bit like they put us in a position where people are going to guess and miss and stumble along the way and then run out of Protem. And here you go. Conveniently, there's more Protem for you. It does cost you money. The good news about the Protem, it is still up. It's still for sale. Is you're technically buying Upics, $10 for 10,000 Upics, $50 for 50,000 Upics, $100 for 100,000 UPX. The good old-fashioned exchange rate Upland has always offered for going and using USD to buy UPX. You can buy theoretically in the future with other currencies. Right now it's USD only, but when you can go and you can buy those packages in USD, you're gonna get the Protom as a bonus. So for the 10,000 UPX pack, 80 Protom as a bonus, 500 Protom as a bonus for 50,000 UPX pack, and 100,000 UPX pack is 1,100 Protom as a bonus. Again, if you need the Protom to get restarted, you're willing to buy some UPX, the opportunity is still there. They're still in the market. It's still an opportunity. But again, caveat is if things were perfect from day one, if you do enough to get started in a clean way, that 555 Protom that you got dropped per totem have been enough to carry you through the month. So it's unfortunate that there was enough issues with for certain people that they're out of the game already this early on. They technically, again, if they're at 0 Protom, they technically have the opportunity to restart, to get started, assuming that they haven't significantly affected those cycles. A couple things, obviously, just to give you a baseline, why not? Overall, there are different numbers that are put out by different groups. People are doing different feeding cycles. They're finding with different totems, they are behaving different ways. But the broad feeding cycles, 8-hour cycles on an orange, 12-hour cycles on a brown, 18-hour on a purple, about 24 hours on a green, 30 hours on a red, 38 hours on a blue, and for a gold, 48-hour feed cycle. That is the optimal time, more or less, between feed cycles. It ends up being the optimal time between, or the likely time between your output. So you get an output on a gold, 48 hours later, you get your second output on a gold. It's one of those things that the better your color, or on the scale of rarity, the longer you can go between feedings. Keeping in mind that maybe a shorted feeding is easier because now you can keep track of it. If you're feeding every couple days, every 2 days, and you get lost on the time, maybe you're gonna miss it. So just keep your eyes open. Spreadsheets are the way to go. Spreadsheets have been the way that a lot of people have been operating. Go into your spreadsheet, check your individual totems, remind yourself what the feed cycle is if you ever forget. Remind yourself the last time you fed, because there is this rotation where if you get off 2 hours and you get off another 2 hours and maybe another 2 hours, especially when you have a weird time cycle like 38 hours or 18 hours, where if you get yourself a little off on your own schedule, you could be pushing that outside of the ideal schedule and then miss a cycle. And that's where we start worried about getting those penalties. Penalties affecting either the number of intervals that you have during that first cycle. You could start losing intervals. You could lose the efficiency on the payout. And then, of course, the one that people fear, the one that people have been seeing, one that has people pulling their hair out, is their totems are dying. Again, all I can say about this so far, again, because this is the one thing we're dealing with right now, is that Upland intentionally put limited information. They wanted the community to figure out. Unfortunately, not everybody's as tied in with the community. Not everybody sat on their hands for 3 or 4 days and waited for data to come out. There's a lot of people who play Upland on the toilet when they go and spend 5 minutes in there doing other things. They're not somebody who's in Discord 3 hours a day. They're not somebody who listens to a Upland broadcaster 1 or 2 or 3 nights a week. They are somebody who, again, they're looking to play a game. They bought a totem. They see the hints that Upland gave. They try to follow those. They got their 555 Protom, and they said, if I have 555 Protom, that must mean that's pretty close to the amount I feed. And there's a lot of people who got caught in that trap. There's people who were trying to figure out what the feeding cycle was because based on the hints that they were given, and they misunderstood what those hints meant and how to function with them. They overfed and fed out all their Protom. And of course, we had people who thought that they fed them a lot less frequently than they did. And if you thought you fed them a lot less frequently than you did, you may have missed enough cycles that you have accrued a significant penalty or had a dead totem. I do want to put out there, the great news is right now, if you do have a totem that's alive, there's a lot of details, there are a lot of items that are out there, and look, Assassins has some pretty good data. There's a lot of other groups that have data as well. Red Hook has a whole server they set up about totems where people can exchange information, people can discuss what their experience has been. So there are plenty of support groups out there. I don't try to put out this is the one data, this is the be all data, because people have had different experiences. Some people say that one totem's behaving one way, somebody else says it's behaving differently for them. Definitely go in and get the best information you can, follow it the best you can, and you do have an opportunity to still turn a profit. I will report that as of today, I took my first profit, not overall, but in a interval on a orange, on one of my orange dragonflies. Dragonflies, obviously, they all have the same payout curve. Depending on the color, its number of feed cycles, all dragonflies should be moving towards profit right now. Again, profit on, I put the UPX in, I took an UPX out in one interval, and I'm getting more out than I put in. I got to make up for, oh my gosh, am I at 12, 13 feedings of loss? So that's going to take a while. We'll see how that goes. But ultimately, it looks like the totem cycle is set up in such a way that you get rewarded for doing things well in the beginning, at the end of the month. If you make mistakes in the beginning of the month, you get penalized at the end. And guess what? The end of the month is when most of those cycles pay out the most. That's when they're putting out the vast majority of their rewards. So again, it's an interesting concept. I get it. I get the efficiency, but it's not just efficiency. You make the mistakes up front while you learn. You're trying to learn, titrate, do better. And now the punishments, now the penalization, and now the penalties, they follow you to the end of the month. And that's where you would otherwise, that's where everything otherwise would make sense. Otherwise, you now know the information. You now can do your best possible job. And if the penalties caught up with you, you can. And the other thing I do want to put out there on totems, we've talked about it a few times. It is the way it is. If you have not started your totem as of today, the totem is can't get started this cycle. It will be ready to start next cycle. If your totem is dead, it's dead this cycle. With those two things in mind, there still is a totem market out there. There's people who have maintained and tried to keep totems alive that are for sale. There are people who started totems that maybe have a long cycle and they didn't do much input to them, but they have such a long cycle. They were started so late that it's very possible that they put it up for sale. They haven't interacted with it, but it still has benefit. It still is alive. It still can be used this cycle. If you are buying totems on the secondary market for your own use, you have somebody, a friend or somebody you know, who tried the totem market, said, "Ooh, I can't put that much effort in. I can't figure it out," and they want to get rid of their totem. Just make sure you know what's going on with it. Again, if it says inactive, you're not going to be able to feed this cycle. You may in the future, this cycle, no option. If that totem has accrued penalties, you may not have an obvious way of seeing the check mark on that totem that says, hey, look, you're going to have limited number of intervals. You're going to lose intervals at the end of the cycle. You may not have a note that says, hey, look, you're going to keep getting payouts, but your payouts are going to be diminished because you had some issues in the beginning of the feeding. And it's not going to tell you, of course, when you look at it, what the cycle is on the unit. You have to figure that out third party. But the great thing about all the totems, whether you own them or not, you can see what the feeding cycle was, what the person was feeding them, how they fed. You can't, if you're buying them third party. This was revealed to me today by somebody who was looking at some totems to feed other people's totems. You cannot see what their efficiency score has been. So you don't have any of those hints that tell you how well that totem is doing and how well that totem may do in the future. Just keep that in mind. But there is that opportunity. If there's for sale, you can see if it's still active. You can see if it's still in cycle and still working. And you can see what the previous feed plan has been on it. So if it's a blue and it was fed fed in the right band of every 38 hours over the last 3 days, 4 days, then you know you may have a well-functioning or a good condition totem. But if it's orange and you can see that it missed 4 feed cycles over the last 3 days, and it's got a situation where that penalty is building up. I mean, it's a hexagonal base. It's building its penalties up. You may not have a good profit towards the end of the month on Protem. And then the last thing is, if you're buying totems right now, you have to come up with a Protem. You have to either go to Upland, buy the Upix, get the Protem as a bonus, or have extra Protem from other totems you have started and running. The one thing I do want to put out there is, we know that with a lot of the cycles, we're going to continue to have losses before we have gains for a lot of this cycle, for some of the waves, some of the curves. So keep that in mind. You don't want to overspend your Protem if you are trying to start somebody else's or take over somebody else's totems right now. You keep in mind that if you run out, potentially you can still buy Protem until those packages are gone from the store. Like I said, I think Upland tried to put out more than they thought people were going to buy. They didn't want it to be a rush to the finish. They didn't want people to buy all the Protem. They wanted, as the need, as the desire, as people were going to see the need for more Protem coming into the market, that there was going to be there. There was going to be some supply. So we're going to keep our eyes out on that. As of right now, it's there. We can argue about the effectiveness, and a lot of people have had that debate about the effectiveness of how the information was rolled out, how much more information should have been provided, and what could have been done to save a couple people from this idea of overspending the Protem so there's none left, or killing a bunch of totems within the first 4 days as the community was still figuring things out. But what we can say is, now the information is a lot better. Get yourself hitched up with a group who's been looking at the numbers from day one, and you are going to be in a much better place for the rest of this month. And that's essentially how you're going to take a profit here. I do want to put out there that we are starting to finally see some of the totems tip over into profitability, meaning we know it can happen. We haven't seen a lot of totems pay themselves off or pay off the early efforts, but we expect that the profit per interval, as that increases, or expected to continue to increase, we're going to start to see that we're going to get a return on investment. The amount of Protem we put in, we're going to get more out. It's going to help us get through the end of the month. And in theory, you're going to end up with more than the 555 Protem per totem that you started with at the beginning of the month. The better you did with feeding, the more you'll have in that pile, in theory. If you didn't waste it, if you didn't overfeed, you're going to be in a much better position at the end of the month. That's the theory. We still have another at least 21 days to get this figured out. At least 23 days to get this figured out. Keeping in mind that we had a 5-day cycle to start things. If you started on the 5th day of that start period, of that early opportunity to get things started, again, you're going to still have 30 days from the start. It means you got a few more days left than if you had started on Tuesday. But the caveat there is, you probably started with more information. When you get done the cycles, there's probably going to be a recharge period or something where Upland is going to reformat what is going on with the next cycle, and then we'll worry about when the next cycle starts. The good news about the next cycle is we're going to have all the information that we already have, we've learned along the way. The bad news about the next cycle is Upland can titrate things. They can change the number of hours between cycles. They can change the feed amount. They can slightly tweak or adjust the curves for each of the totems. I hope they don't do a lot of it, but just keep that in mind when you are planning what you're going to do next month and the month of the future. Keep that in mind when you are going to be buying totems, is that if you buy a totem on secondary right now for the remaining 4 cycles, keep in mind that it may not be as easy as take what we learned this cycle and apply it to the future cycles. It is a food for thought, but it's also part of the gamification. Part of where the game lies is that each cycle is going to be different. And the reason for the game is Upland's trying to titrate this input-output cycle, what people can do, what can't be done, what's going to work, what's effective, so that when they go and put life into place, and we have this STEM token. We've talked about it for 2 years. When we finally have this STEM token for life, when we put it in and we use it with our living creatures, when we're talking about how do we yield STEM from certain animals or from certain life forms, How does that work? What does the functionality, what does the input look like? What does the graphics look like? How does it communicate to us? All of that's being figured out now. So when we have the first life form, we can actually have something intelligible to interact with and something that works. And I think that ultimately, um, these iterative tests and doing the test before you do the thing has been successful for Upland. I think that it's going to um, take a little bit of cycle 2, 3, 4 being a little more fun for certain people, for people to say it was a success. But right now that I'm starting to see profits, I can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know I've got 3 times as much left as I have already put into this, but I also know that, or I have a better feeling that this was actually going to work. I'm not going to run out of Protem on day 14, which for a period of time I was worried that was going to happen. I feel like I'm going to get more back than I put in, starting to feel confident in that. And I know that I don't have to do any more math. I think the math is pretty well figured out, at least for me. I've got it pretty well managed on a table. I've decided that I can still do this and have to shift feedings every once in a while so I can sleep like a normal human being. So that is good that I'm at that point and that we're at that point. But ultimately, we're going to continue on with totems. We do know that later in this week or later in the next couple of weeks, we're supposed to be getting more information on STEM. We're going to do kind of a town hall at some point or some other form of AMA on STEM and the future of STEM. So we'll keep our eyes out for that. That is going to be much closer. Again, it could be 3 to 5 weeks out, but be much closer to our next iteration or next update on Sparklet. Obviously learn more about what Spark can do before Sparklet goes on sale, and then of course trying to be keeping our eyes on the other things that are happening this quarter. We do know that the NFLPA replicas are finally coming. I've got a little X on my calendar for the big game for the NFL this year. I won't use the name of the big game because whatever. They don't always like other people using it. They keep it reserved for themselves. But put a big X on that day already. So we're only 6 weeks away. We're only 6 weeks away. Not even. Wow. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong counter. Apparently, we're 3 weeks away at this point. So we're counting that counter fast. So keep that in mind. If Upland's going to get the replicas in here in time, we are going to be able to see, or we're going to be looking forward to, likely seeing that over the next several weeks. Keep our eyes on a couple things like that. The totems are going to continue to be a slog for the next month, but now that they've been established, now that the cycles have happened, today technically is federally a holiday in the United States, Martin Luther King Day. So I definitely do see that there's a reason why maybe the staff was out of the office today. Hopefully they pick things back up tomorrow. But for tonight, thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to the rest of the month. I'm looking forward to my totems starting to pay me back for the work I did for them earlier in the month. And of course, as we do end the show always, floor is open, mics are unmuted, and the floor is yours.